Is Christian Science a system of right thinking? A lot of people think so. Hi, my name is Julie. I was born into the Christian Science church and religion, and after 40 years I went my own way, and I feel that brought me back to what Mrs. Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy, the woman who discovered Christian Science in 1866, was really trying to say to us and teach us about the nature of reality as being spirit and not matter. Mary Baker Eddy in her writings uses the word right thinking a lot. Well, the word, if you look it up in the concordance, in Science and Health 4 times, and in other writings 13 times. And I think a lot of people think that we are a system of right thinking. A lot of teachers, like many, maybe a majority of the teachers and practitioners of today, teach that we're a system of like, think this way, not that way, and you'll be golden. It's like power of positive thinking, it's new thought, it's manifesting, it's quimbyism, it's, all the stuff going on. And we think that if you change, I'm going to think about this differently, that is, that's, yes, that's like the kindergarten Christian Science, where you're kind of learning about the truth of the nature of reality, that spirit is, everything, and that what we see is actually spirit if we consider it ideas, the ideas that we're having, that we're getting to see. It's actually, we're seeing it in our consciousness, but we're getting to see our thoughts like a holographic image, but it's going on in our consciousness. So if what we see we call substantial, and if the body in the mirror we call us, then that's the issue that Mrs. Eddy was trying to point out, that we've kind of fallen into a trap and now we need to get unwound. We're in a mesmeric state called mortal mind, or the human ego, or human egotism, and we need to be woken up by our true state, divine mind, which is never hypnotized and never mesmerized. And we the only way to wake up is like starting to turn our thoughts to this divine mind and listening and surrendering all of our human thinking, all of our mortal thinking. And we're just not clearly taught this in Christian Science. We're taught so much. Change the way you're thinking. Think about it this way. Know the truth means like do a lot of affirmations and denials in this direction, and that'll get you like physical healing, it'll get you financial healing, it'll get you all these things you want in your life. And I found a writer a while ago when I was one of my friends, the man who had started to realize that he was a CSB. He was a teacher in the church, had a big practice. And not one day, but over a period of time, he started to realize he was teaching incorrectly, that he and everyone in the movement was teaching it like it was the system of right thinking. And that we use the mind to change our world. And in fact, we surrender the human thinking, and our world does appear to change, but we haven't changed anything. We've just come back into alignment with what is true. So one of the authors that he shared with me was Wentworth, Byron, Winslow, and he wrote some cool stuff. And I bought all of his stuff. I think I bought it at the bookmark. It was not all of his stuff, but Let God Do It. He has 4 of these. Let God Do It, God Will Do It, God Is Doing It, and God Can Do It. And they're all very similar. And I just found out that you can get them, you can read them for free on the Mary Baker Eddy Science Institute website. So I'll post a link to that. It's not obviously a Mother Church authorized website, but that might be a good thing sometimes. But so this article, I just wanted to read a little bit because it really helped me to see the difference of what I'm talking about. He starts out, hold thoughts steadfastly to the enduring, the good, and the true, and you will bring these into your experience proportionably to their occupancy of your thoughts. This is from the Christian Science textbook, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. How shall this be done? It is certain that the human or mortal mind cannot hold thought steadfastly to anything, try as it may. There is no continuity in the human or mortal mind. It is absolutely no good. It cannot be good because it is of not of God. It is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or better, the tree of right thinking and wrong thinking, and it must be cut down, root, and branch. It must not be cultivated, but be educated out of itself. It is utterly impossible to teach the human or mortal mind spiritual truths. And if it were possible, that mind would be just as liable to turn around and believe the very opposite. For at best, the human mind can never know, but only believes, and belief is changeable. The textbook of Christian Science says spirit is the ego, which never believes, but knows. To stuff the human mind with sage truths and expect therewith to heal the sick and raise the dead is as foolish as it would be to stuff a turkey with sage dressing and expect it to live again and strut about the barnyard. Even Omar Khayyam glimpsed something of this when he sang, myself when young did eagerly frequent doctor and saint, and heard great argument about it and about, but evermore came out by the same door as I went in. That's what most people in the Christian, most teachers and practitioners, most articles are teaching. And he's saying, by using the human mind to heal, you're going in the same door you're coming out. It's just using the power of belief. So then the second paragraph, third paragraph down, what could be the solution? Certainly there must be one, for God, through his inspired writers and teachers, would never require something to be done which was impossible of accomplishment. The solution is simple. It is Christian Science, or the exact knowledge of the Christ. Meaning by this, not exact knowledge about or concerning the Christ as coming to a mind therefore ignorant of the subject, of which mind must attain the knowledge, but rather the arising or coming of the Christ mind, or actual presence of God, which always has this knowledge, Christ's exact knowledge. We have a similar expression in Isaiah, where we find the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea, meaning not that those of the earth earthly shall attain knowledge concerning or about God, but that the earth, the world, and they that dwell therein shall be filled not with their own knowledge concerning God, but that the actual presence of God or mind will come to pass with God's own knowledge, not something that the human mind shall attain. In fact, as we shall see, the human mind with its vain struggles to know God will give place to the one mind, God, with his, God's, knowledge, and thus shall the earth be full of the knowledge of God, of God's knowledge, as coming from himself, and not from the human mind in regard to himself. I mean, to me, it's like, yeah. You know, the mesmerized self cannot be used to heal, to teach, to study, to fix things, to, The mesmerized self is what we call mortal mind. And we kind of got so confused. We thought, well, when she's saying hold thoughts steadfastly to the good, the enduring, and the, when we read about right thinking, we're thinking, oh, we got to teach the mortal mind to do all this stuff, to study, to heal, to do right thinking. But in fact, what we're doing through self-examination, which is what Mrs. Eddy taught as the way out, examine oneself and see how much sin claims of us and how much of that claim we admit as valid or comply with. Sin being the belief that you're the personality, the human body, the mortal self. We examine ourselves, we go inward and we listen about what we need to know, what our sticking points are as to our belief of something, that us being this human personality in this human world. And when those things come up, those sticky points, those errors, we let them go and we move on. We don't ever go back to that way of being or thinking again. But that's not the Christians. That's not, holding thought steadfastly to the truth. That's the process of waking up. The divine mind, our real mind, is waking us up through the self-examination process, through a willingness on the side of the human thinking to the knowingness on the side of the divine mind, which is all us. It's all us. We give it different names. Even human consciousness, Christ consciousness, is just a name for that in-between state where we're not completely mesmerized anymore, and we're on our way up to the ascension process where as we're ascending, we're waking up and realizing ourselves home as divine mind. So this self-examination process is the letting go. It is letting go and letting God run the show. Our divine mind is God, letting that our divine mind, our true self, soul, run the show. And then as that happens more and more and more, over time we wake up to being, we know who we really are. And in that state of divine mind, divine awareness, where we know who we really are and we know what's real, we don't need to argue anymore. We don't need to do right thinking anymore. In fact, we're not at all convinced of anything going on in what we call the material world anymore. It doesn't faze us. It's like a movie going on of all the thoughts of other mortals. We're just watching it. Oh, that's mortality, the thoughts of mortals, or the thought of the mesmerized self, but it's not my reality. It's not our reality. And you see it more as a movie playing, or bunches of movies playing. And that state of knowing, of getting, is a healing state. People who come around us, people who come into contact with us when we're at that point, like where Mary Baker Eddy was, where Jesus was, where these teachers that were sent here, these way showers that were brought to our level of consciousness, that's where they are. And so we got confused as in the church and the religion, thinking that that the mesmerized state, really not knowing we're in a mesmerized state right now. I mean, you can tell if you're in a mesmerized state do you believe you were born to human parents? Do you believe you came through the birth process into this existence? Do you believe at some point you'll die? Do you believe that if I cut you, you bleed? Do you believe in gravity? Do you believe in you have to have resources to be fed, to be clothed, to material resources? Yeah, you do. I mean, you just have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. Yeah, we believe these things. And so that we know we're in a mesmerized state when we still believe these things. And what the movement does, and what these teachers like my teacher, they're called absolute Christian Zionists. They just are convinced that you just tell the mortal mind what's real, what's true, and then mortal mind's like, oh, we'll eventually get it. Well, just enough teaching, enough learning, enough studying, enough right thinking, enough, oh, I am the divine mind. Yep, I knew it all along. So disease isn't real, and then you ask that person who says, if you grew up in the movement, if you grew up with or surrounded by Christian Scientists or know some Christian Scientists, when they get ill, there's a lot of arguing going on. Well, no, I'm not ill, and I'm not ill because of this, and I'm God's perfect child, and I'm not going to give in to this. And anytime you're coming from a standpoint that you're already within the dream and you feel you have to argue your way out, and that's, you're in the dream, you're mesmerized. And at one point you will wake up, and then you will just know, and you will hold steadfastly to the good, the true, and the enduring, because how else can you be? What else would you be? And you can't skip that step of unwinding. You can't affirm and deny that everything away. Affirm that I'm a spiritual being, deny that I'm a material being, and think that the power of your denial, the power of your affirmation somehow makes it real for you. No, the only way to make it real for you is to allow this unwinding process where you're just totally there's no willpower there. There's no self there. There's just a humble willingness to be led out of the dream and unwound by your true nature, the divine mind. In Let God Do It, in the same article that I was reading, he gives an example. And you can call it the actress. At the time, he was a practitioner or a teacher or both. I'm not sure. Practitioner. On the Mary Baker Eddy Science Institute, there's a biography of him. It says he was a journalistic practitioner from 1906 to 1938. There was a dear old lady, an actress, who had touched the hem of the garment of Christian Science. Her physician, one of no little prominence in New York, had pronounced her riddled from head to foot with cancer, true carcinoma, and said that she could not live beyond a 12-month. The practitioner who was called on the case at that point of his experience believed that Christian Science was a system of right thinking. When she turned to him for help and away from the surgeon who had done whatever he could to make her more comfortable, including the cutting away of 2 external growths, the practitioner, in the attempt to heal her of this dread disease, proceeded with declarations and affirmations of truth and contradictions of error, and by truthful arguments of one kind or another, but all predicated on, based on, or instigated by some error to be eradicated. This was without success. For though he strove mightily with right thinking, he inevitably came out by the same door wherein he went in, because the human mind only was praying, and not the Christ mind. This is evident, for the human mind alone can utter a prayer instigated by a desire to eradicate an evil, insomuch as the divine mind, God, is of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity, and so could have no desire in any more than light could have a desire to eradicate darkness. Then one night, when the nurse in attendance was taking a well-earned rest, the practitioner was left alone with the patient. Yet not alone, for God was certainly present. It seemed as though she was passing away. What should he do? At this point, he dimly perceived the substance of the foregoing and the utter futility of his own right thinking with the human mind. And it dawned upon him that the divine mind, or the Christ mind, could not possibly pray or base its thinking on some error to be eradicated, and that consequently he was only using the human mind. He recollected also the statement in miscellaneous writings, "There is not sufficient spiritual power in the human thought to heal the sick or the sinful," and saw that in some way he must let that mind be in him, which was also in Christ Jesus. Here was one of those instances where the evil cannot be cast out other than by prayer and fasting. It was evident to him that if the lady was to be restored to her normal health, he must deny self, and God must come to her assistance. So then and there he turned away from the human mind with its thinking and turned to God. On another occasion, he had been called in to see a woman and found her suffering intensely, in extremis, and plainly dying before his very eyes. He was alone with her too. What should he do? He called to God and said, "Oh God, tell me, what should I do?" And God said, "Son, don't you do anything. Leave it all to me." And in a few moments, after praising and glorifying God in song, the claim was broken. And in the morning, the woman herself telephoned that she was healed of the trouble. On this occasion, he cried out, "Here I am, Lord, send me, and tell me what to do, Father, for I know not what. And speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." And then he waited for a reply. In a few short moments, it came clearly and distinctly. "If a man keep my saying, he shall never see death." And there flashed into consciousness, why, of course. And not only shall I not see death in or of myself, but shall not see it anywhere. And the vision of eternal life had appeared to him. This entirely satisfied him, and he laid himself down and slept an unbroken childlike sleep, which he had not done for many days or nights. Next morning, when he awakened, he found the patient resting quietly and practically well. In a few days, she left for Atlantic City for a well-earned rest and returned to her work on the stage in a few weeks, more well, strong, healthy, and happy, and lived for many years afterwards to a more than a ripe old age. It is interesting to note that the same surgeon who had pronounced her as being riddled with cancer and had foretold her certain death within the year, examined her about a year and a half afterwards and found her to be as sound as a dollar and without a trace of cancer. There is good reason why his name should be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. You know, the temptation is to get emotional that there was a healing. There was a healing, isn't that beautiful? But focusing on the healing, I have found, gets us into this mode of wanting to heal and wanting to be healed. And that, if our motives are everything in Christian Science, because thinking is everything, then to have a motive to be healed or to heal others is like, you're making something out of nothing. There's nothing to heal. Illness isn't real. When I read, just be sure you don't go into emotion and, oh my gosh, there was healing. And also know that in this one, he had started this out by saying this actress had already touched the hem of Christian Science, which means she was already on the ascension path when this came into her, when she developed cancer. And she also had used a surgeon to get all of the tumors off and everything. So it's it's she's already come a long way, and has made progress in Christian Science. Jesus didn't heal everyone. Certain places he went, he couldn't heal anyone. And he didn't just go healing everyone. The people that were supposed to be healed, that were ready to be healed, came to him, were attracted to him. And those were the ones he healed. And same with Mrs. Eddy. She never says, oh, heal everybody. Everybody can be healed. And, there's not one, everybody's in a different stage of development. Everybody's on the different path. And, sometimes we need the experiences that we're having are teaching us a lot, and we may seem to be suffering, but suffering isn't real. And when an individual is ready for healing, you'll know it, and they'll know it. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is the unwinding from our state of mortal mind to, the belief of a state of mortal mind. It's not even a real state. It's just, what we're believing. We're believing in an erroneous conception of life, and that belief is, mesmerism. We're believing in it, and we're coming out of it as, our true state is an unmesmerized self called the divine mind, and the steps in between: Christ consciousness, human consciousness. So that you're still one person. Or person's even not the right word. You're still just one being, individually one and collectively one. You're not two beings or three beings. There's not mortal mind, Christ, or man, Christ, and God. There's still only one. We just have different names for what state it is. But I think that, having this healing in here is kind of gives a nice illustration of what this person went through as a practitioner, starting out like everyone, like all of us are thinking, oh, what do I have to know? I mean, even if you're not, every Christian Scientist has to be healing if you believe you can't go to doctors. So if you believe you can't take medicine, then, you grow up thinking, I've got to heal, I've got to treat, I've got to sit down and know the truth. So we've all been there, and I just love this, his books, or I guess you call them books. God will do it, God is doing it, let God do it, and God can do it. And remember, in kindergarten Christian Science, we're taught that God is out there, and we turn to God, and God leads us out of the mesmerism. That's, and God is our shepherd, and we are God's favorite child, because we're taught we are the image of God in kindergarten Christian Science. But then as we graduate and go up higher, we recognize, no, there's only one being. We've always been told there's just one. Principle and idea is one. So there's not me and God. There's just one being. And God is also a term for what state, the highest state, the state of knowing, the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-acting, all-wise. Those are the definitions of God in Science and Health, because that's the definition of that state of being, of knowing, is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-acting, all-wise. Principle, mind, soul, spirit, life, truth, and love. That is like the absolute truth of who we really are. So you can, as you're growing and developing in Christian Science, God is a word too. We're not man, Christ, and God. We're not mortal, human, and divine. No, it's all just one. It's just different names we give to the different modes of consciousness we're in, going all the way from completely mesmerized to not mesmerized at all. That we can't just go there by saying absolute truths and just being like, well, if it's true, then what I got to worry about? Well, if you have to get there through this process that he calls self-examination and unwinding and letting go. Let God do it. Is letting go, is surrendering the ego, surrendering human thinking, in favor of listening to the divine mind, our true mind. Everything happens in that listening. That's where all the good stuff happens, the listening and the following. And so learning to listen is a key element in our progress. So you can read these books on the Mary Baker Eddy Science Institute. You can also order them from the bookmark, I think. Still, I'm not sure, but hopefully that helps give another example of the difference between Christian Science and a system of human thinking or human faith.